Lavonne and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we are back for another Coffee and Questions, and Coffee and Questions is my chance to be able to answer your questions from both YouTube comments on previous videos and then Instagram. I put out a poll every month and I ask you what you want to know, and so I answer your questions here today. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, go ahead and subscribe down below. Today we are going to talk all about tearing slash Kegels. We talk about supporting one another. We talk about pooping and puking during labor slash eating and drinking, avoiding vaginal exams, postpartum anxiety, that's a really good one. So many things. If you want to know all the things that I talk about in this video, everything's going to be described in the description box down below. You can also find some fun links down there, including a link to this shirt, which by the way is not sponsored, but I love. Today I'm going to use the word vagina a few times, and let me just tell you, it is not a bad word. Let's get started. We're gonna start with Instagram, like I always say as usual, but it really is as usual. Nitty gritty for this September Coffee and Questions. I put out a poll over there. Stay tuned, guys, if you're interested in getting in on trying to get your question answered. I usually put out the poll towards the end of the month. I pretty much always film like the last day of the month or the first day of the next month. So stay tuned around like the 28, 29, 30, 31 day of the month if you want to try to get in on me answering one of your questions. Bella Beauty 28 says, is it true that too much Kegel exercise can cause you to tear to a 3rd or a 4th degree tear? You guys in tearing, I know it's a big concern. Tears are graded from 1st to 4th degree. 1st and 2nd, pretty normal, not a huge deal. 3rd and 4th degree, like not the ones you want. And so a lot of times when you're looking at clinical data of what the studies say as far as avoiding tears, a lot of them say that you could potentially avoid a 3rd or 4th degree tear. That's the whole data on perineal massage, which by the way, if you are looking to know how to do perineal massage, I have a new product in my store. So you can go over to bundlebirth.com and I have a whole guide to doing perineal massage with little hand drawings that I did myself. The data says that it can help you to decrease your chance of a 3rd or a 4th degree tear. But with the 1st and 2nd degree, it doesn't really do anything. The question then is, does Kegel exercise potentially cause you to tear and have a 3rd or 4th degree tear? So Kegel exercises are when you squeeze your vagina muscles really tight, like you're trying to hold your pee, and you hold them there. I'm doing one right now, and then you slowly release your Kegel muscles. So you're strengthening your pelvic floor in theory. There's two sides of your pelvic floor, different like areas of your pelvic floor. There's like the pee squeezers and like the poop holders, and then there's the internal bowl that like supports all of your pelvic organs. And so when you're doing a Kegel exercise, we like you to not only just squeeze your pee, but actually bring it deeper into like your abdomen, which helps to engage those like inner pelvic floor muscles. Question, therefore, is can doing a Kegel actually cause you to tear? Imagine you have like a rubber band and you have, or like a TheraBand. Let me get one. I just started carrying these around with me everywhere I go. Imagine that your pelvic floor is like a TheraBand and it's super stretchy and open. You want it to be strong enough to hold all of the pelvic organs without being too weak where it's just like a floppy mess in there. But at the same time, you also don't want it too strong that when you go to bring your baby down, it won't allow your baby down, and it's too strong so that it potentially could just tear. Like the only way that baby can get through is with it tearing because it's too strong. So where the truth is in that is that we don't want your pelvic floor too strong. We also don't want it too weak. And so that's where seeing a pelvic floor therapist is honestly the best thing that you can do, because they can assess your specific pelvic floor to know, is it too strong or is it too weak? The shorter answer to that question is no, doing Kegel exercises will not cause you to have a 3rd or 4th degree tear. But you also, like if you're working out and you're doing Kegels and you feel like you potentially have a strong enough pelvic floor, then yes, you probably don't need to do Kegels. You don't want your pelvic floor too strong. Big Mariana says, periods while breastfeeding. Let's talk about it. Can you have both? Yes, absolutely, you can have your period while you breastfeed. It is pretty common because of the breastfeeding hormones for it to potentially prevent your period from coming back as quickly as if you didn't breastfeed. The other thing is ovulation. I gotta throw that one in there too, because periods, like you assume once you have your period, you probably can get pregnant, but you can get pregnant while breastfeeding, even if you haven't had a period yet. So they say once you get your period, sometimes it does affect your milk supply. There is this kind of learning curve where your body has to go through and figure out how to continue to make the milk. Remember, it's supply and demand. So if you're having a milk issue, demand more from your breast. My favorite tool for breastfeeding is the Haka. Guys, it's like $13 on Amazon. It's on my breastfeeding Amazon list, link down below. It's literally like night and day difference. You suck it on your boob while you're feeding on the other side, and then it has this gentle suction pressure to help collect and increase your milk supply, and then you get a little milk to save afterwards. So honestly, it's the most genius invention ever. Get yourself a Haka. Once you get your period, expect your milk supply to maybe drop a little bit, but it means nothing for your breastfeeding journey. Just keep at it, and then eventually your body will regulate. This is good. Hannah, 85, says, is postpartum anxiety a thing too? Because I feel crazy. So first of all, I want to just normalize this, that Hannah, you're not crazy. Postpartum anxiety is actually more common than postpartum depression. There's been this movement in the perinatal world where now instead of when we talk about postpartum depression, it's like that's the only thing that can happen in the postpartum period. There's this umbrella called perinatal mood and anxiety disorders called PMADS. Go ahead and go to Cochrane, go to WebMD, like some of your more reputable sources, and look up some of this stuff. So one of them, and the most common, is postpartum anxiety. And that's where you may feel overwhelmed, you may not sleep as much, you might have like the pit in your stomach, you might have rapid heart rate, you might feel like you're obsessing over things. And so yes, it's a thing, no stress about it, but get some help. Honestly, like you don't have to live that way. No one wants to live with anxiety. Deep breathing exercises, meditation, yoga, slowing, doing a lot of self-care, getting outside, setting boundaries with the people in your life to do those things, to provide margin to do those things are going to be really helpful. But then reach out to your doctor and say, look, I'm really struggling with some anxiety. And before you medicate, which that may be an option for you, but go see a perinatal psychologist, psychiatrist to talk to them about some of this stuff and then get a care plan together for you. A lot of this stuff is very manageable. You are not alone, but absolutely postpartum anxiety is a thing. And if you feel like you're struggling, reach out. There's so many resources available to you for that. I could answer all of these questions. These are all such good questions. Pearl Budgel says, do you ever plan on having kids / adopting kids? Yes, someday, Lord willing, I would love to have my own babies. I'll leave it at that. Hayes the name says, is it normal to have different pregnancy symptoms with different pregnancies? Yes, guys, like just because you've been pregnant before, this is why I always say like keep coming back, because every pregnancy is different. This actually reminds me a lot of my VBAC class. I just put together a VBAC class. If you're a VBAC mama, I have an entire curriculum for you on my website. In that class, I talk about how important it is that we set aside the first birth and say, you know what, that was its own situation. This next birth is its own situation. And so with that being said, I want to remind you all that just because you've done it before doesn't mean that it's going to look exactly the same. Your labor and birth will probably look a little different. Mind you, now you know your body, you know your sensations, you've been there, done that. So yes, of course it's gonna feel a lot more familiar, but to have different pregnancy symptoms, absolutely totally normal between pregnancies. Irie Indica says, baby hiccups, normal and safe or no? Baby hiccups are 100% normal, expected. If you feel like there's like little jumps, like rhythmic jumps versus like random kicks, then that's probably your baby hiccuping. We can hear it on the monitor when you're in labor. Yay, great, no big deal. It's totally normal. All About Grace 101 says, if you have placenta previa, can you deliver vaginally? The answer is no, you cannot deliver vaginally. It is absolutely not safe to. I actually have a really cool video graphic on my Instagram about placenta previa and the different ones, and you can see with that picture why it's not possible to deliver vaginally. So sorry, but no. Grace Gearhart says, anything that we should be taking if trying to get pregnant, and then how long should we try before we seek help? Rule of thumb here is yes, you should be taking a prenatal vitamin. I recommend Ritual, which I'll link them down below as well. They're amazing prenatal vitamins. And then how long should you try? The rule of thumb is 1 year. So you should be actively trying, have some sort of documentation of like, hey, we started trying this month. I've been tracking my ovulation or my periods or whatever. And then after a year of trying, then it's time to go see somebody about it and just get some more information. Bianca Mesa says, how long does a woman typically bleed after birth? what is normal and what isn't. So typically with blood loss, you will bleed like a heavy period. Bleeding should always be more to less, so it should be decreasing kind of like your period does over time. If you like randomly have been chilling and then all of a sudden you get up and go for a walk or you're a little more active, you might have a little bit more spotting that day, but it's actually normal to have abnormal bleeding, discharge, something going on down there for up to 6 weeks. After 6 weeks, if you're still bleeding, then it might actually be a period, but if you've bled that entire time, like blood, like period blood, like that's a lot of bleeding and definitely something to reach out about. But the blood should turn from like dark red to pinkish to more of like a yellowish tinged color. All of that is normal. If you're passing huge clots, if you're lightheaded, if you're feeling super weak and pale, definitely something to reach out to your doctor about, because you want to make sure that you're not bleeding too much to actually affect your body, like too much blood loss. Wasim Youssef Eng says, should I be worried about needing to puke or poop during labor if I eat or drink? Super common question here. It's super normal to puke while you labor because of the labor hormones, and then also because you're having contractions that are pushing up on your stomach. A lot of people puke. So if you're eating during labor, that's why small, frequent meals are recommended in early labor when you're not in the hospital. I also actually have a post about eating during labor on my Instagram. So guys, I'm giving a ton more information over there, little snippets. But once you're in the hospital, they do recommend that you just have clear liquid, so anything you can see through. And really though, guys, when you're in labor, you're not really that hungry. A lot of times, and maybe towards the end, you're like needing to munch on something, but everything slows down. So gastric emptying is what it's called, slows down, where you may eat something, it sits in your stomach, but it's not really digesting because all of your energy is going towards getting the baby out. So you may feel full, but then that food is really just sitting there not digesting. So PS, with the whole pooping thing, whatever's in your intestines when you start out, if you poop, it's not because you ate 3 hours before that. There's no way that your food can make it through the digestive tract in that amount of time. It usually takes 12 to 24 hours to work its way through. So maybe if you labored for 24 hours, but remember, everything slows down. So anytime anybody poops, they're like, oh my gosh, I ate this sandwich this afternoon. I'm like, that's not your sandwich. That's like last night's meal. To answer the question, if you're eating in labor, don't worry about pooping. If there's poop in there, you might poop a little, we'll wipe it away and try to be real discreet about it. Usually it means you're pushing really well. No big deal. We see it all the time. But it also doesn't happen all the time as well. Now, as far as puking goes, yes, that's where you want to be mindful about what you're eating in labor, because you may see it again. So I would say, like, don't have your favorite meal while you're in labor because you may not want to eat it again. I know that was being popcorn growing up. I got sick off popcorn when I was a kid, and it took me like 10 years before I could eat popcorn again. So keep that in mind. Dana Miazala says she just had her baby in Italy and got a walking epidural. Are they done in the States? So the answer to this is yes, there is such a thing as a walking epidural. I actually worked at the hospital where it was founded or began, or the anesthesiologist created it, which is super cool. So I know a lot about walking epidurals. That basically does remove enough pain to take the edge off, sometimes complete pain relief, but still allows you to walk, which for a nurse that had only ever dealt with standard epidurals, and then the first time I got a patient up to walk, I was having massive heart attack because we don't want you falling in labor. That's no good. So you can ask if this is offered at your hospital. The more supply and demand, so keep demanding, hey, do you have a walking epidural? It's a great alternative to a standard epidural to give you more sensation. Okay, we gotta go to YouTube. So let's see what we got here. This question comes from Help My Water Broke. She says, I'm 20 weeks today with my third baby. I have a question. With my second baby, my water broke. It was not a big gush. It was very small trickle, which I also have a video graphic about your water breaking on my Instagram. Please go over there, guys. Even when I made it, I was like, that's really helpful. She says, I went to the hospital and labored for about 8 hours, and when I went to start pushing, my doctor said, oh, we have a bulging sac. Did no one break your water yet? I said, my water broke last night, and my doctor said, okay, well, you may have had 2 sacs. I'm still so confused about this to this day. What does that mean? I had 2 separate sacs of water. Baby was in one sac. What was in the other? I sound so dumb, LOL, but I don't get it. No, you're not dumb at all. I would be very confused by that comment. So here's the deal. First of all, I need you to go to my Instagram and look at this water breaking demographic that I just did, because the water bag does have 2 layers. So in terms of 2 sacs, you do technically have 2 sacs, but they're adhered to one another. So to bring back the TheraBand, like imagine that this is like the outside of the water bag. Technically, there's 2 sides to this, like where it, I don't know if this actually helps you, but there is 2 really thin layers, but they're that stuck together so it looks like 1 sac around the baby. And so technically, yes, you have 2 sacs, but what probably happened was the water broke towards the top of the water bag. So it was broken, but it was just trickling down to the bottom. And so when they went and did a vaginal exam, they still felt the bag intact at the bottom or like the end of your vagina. And so that's the part that really does need to break in order to relieve or remove the barrier between baby's head and cervix, so baby can sit on the cervix, and then things typically progress a lot faster. So your water was broken, but it was probably that the bottom part of the water bag was still intact at the bottom between the head, so that's what they felt, and that's where they break the water, if they're going to break your water for you. I'm here to help. This is from Coffee and Questions, August 2019. Chelsea Perrell says, I'm just wondering why a baby would not engage in the pelvis for a first-time mom, overdue, and even during labor. Baby was head down. My labor ended in a C-section due to fetal distress. The only reason I was given is that maybe my baby could not fit in my pelvis. I hope that's not the case because I would like to try for a VBAC, okay? So once again, I'm gonna say, take my VBAC class. That's gonna give you all sorts of tools to get in your VBAC. But baby engaging in the pelvis, so you have this outlet hole that the baby's head has to fit into. And if it's floating around, first of all, your cervix probably won't go away. And second of all, we need baby to come down into the pelvis and then eventually out. So there's a lot of reasons that could be that contributed to why your baby didn't come down. One of that could be pelvic shape, and my pelvis is actually in my trunk. Just kidding, I have more. Where's my pelvis? So this is a hard pelvis. This is not a soft pelvis, clearly. Like, I think the soft pelvis is a little less intimidating, but you get the idea. So this is your pelvis, right? And the way that it's tilted when you stand is like this. So your pubic bone is right here. When baby comes down, baby a lot of times is hitting the pubic bone until it enters into this hole, and that's when the baby is engaged in your pelvis. And so this is where I actually been talking to a girl on Instagram where she's like, how do I get my baby into my pelvis? Do some tilts forward and back. Like on a birth ball, I have a birth ball guide in my store, also on my website. But if you're tucking your pelvis like this, you're opening up and creating this hole where baby can come directly down in versus baby coming down this way, hitting the bone. Tilt it this way, now all of a sudden it can enter into your pelvis. So first of all, yes, you need your pelvis and the hole or the inlet outlet to be adequate size to fit your baby. You also need your baby's head to tuck right. So if the baby's coming down crooked, if the baby's coming down like by its face, if the baby's coming down the opposite direction with the back of the head facing the back of you and kind of hitting this part of the back of your spine or your sacrum or your tailbone, then that can affect the baby coming down. There may be other reasons. It may be size of the baby, that baby was just too big in that pregnancy. So even if baby is head down, there is a chance that it won't fit through your pelvis, but the only way to know is by trying, so keep trying. And this second baby is a completely new scenario. If it is a pelvic issue where like this opening is too small for you, then you will know in the second pregnancy probably because you'll end up with the same scenario. But we like to think positive and assume that this was a fluke accident, that your body can get the baby into the pelvis, and if not, then you know you did what you could. I would say that it's hard to know exactly what was the cause, and the only way to know with this next one is to try again and give it your best shot at a VBAC, believing that it will work for you. So ways to get your baby to engage are gonna be tons of movement, different position changes, listening to your body, and then a lot of those like pelvic tilts forward, so you're like scooping yourself forward while you have a contraction. That's gonna help, and then using your birth ball to like rock and roll your hips around in circles, tilt forward, back, do lots of movement, especially during contractions when you're in labor. And the reason why you were given the answer that maybe it's because the baby couldn't fit, because in this scenario, that was probably their best hypothesis. But different baby, different pregnancy, different potential birth experience, give it your best shot. This actually comes from my How to Choose a Doctor or a Midwife for Your Labor and Birth video. This is a very old school video, guys. Like, I'm like embarrassed to watch it, but the info is still there and it's still pretty good. Shantae Miller says, do pregnancy healthcare providers who do not force you to do prenatal exams exist? And by prenatal exams, I think she's talking about vaginal exams. I'm gonna go with that. I'm burdened so deeply with the thought I have to go through that with a stranger, and I worry this distressing experience will affect my long-term mental health. I can't help but think I'd feel violated, which I would. This is touching on a very touchy subject, guys. And I will just say that OB related things, anything related to your vagina, first of all, we want to talk about because it's not a bad word. And second of all, is very vulnerable. It's very personal. It should be very individualized. And so especially when you're trying to find a provider that fits for you, if this is something that's a trigger for you, or you're concerned about feeling violated, or you really want to avoid vaginal exams at almost all costs, you're probably not gonna be able to avoid all vaginal exams, but we can make the best of it. There are ways around that. The best thing I can tell you right now is finding the right provider, and that's why you probably commented on finding the right provider. So I commend you for even watching that video and speaking up for yourself, because expressing how you feel to a provider and seeing what their response is going to be one of the best things you can do to set yourself up. There are doctors, I would say that you would be more likely finding a midwife that would be more willing to not do any vaginal exams through your pregnancy. Vaginal exams in pregnancy are somewhat, and I'm gonna be flex and flow on that one because there are certain scenarios where they are very helpful information, but in general, there's really no need to do a vaginal exam during your pregnancy. It's once you're in labor that vaginal exams do become more important to know really what's going on inside. So I would start with finding a provider that understands that it's hard for you, that understands your history maybe and your feelings about it, and that you're gonna feel really comfortable with, that they're not gonna push you to do anything you don't wanna do. Let me remind you all here that anything that happens with your body is always your choice. If you are ever feeling pressured to do something that you don't consent to, you have the right to be treated with dignity and respect. It is your body, and unless they receive permission to touch you, it is technically considered assault. So providers out there, you may not like me telling them this, but at the same time I don't care, because informed consent is when you understand why something's being offered to you, you understand what are the risks to it, and you know if you have the option, you always have the option, you know what your other options are. And so when you've been given that information, if I say, no, you cannot check me, no, you cannot touch my vagina, and somebody shoves their fingers in my vagina without my consent, especially after I've said no, that is assault. It is not okay. And unfortunately, this is happening in hospitals. That's not okay. That's unacceptable practice on behalf of a care provider, whether that be doctor, nurse, midwife. Now, there are certain circumstances, particularly emergencies, when they may say, look, I have to check your cervix. We have to make sure that there's no emergency going on down there, because especially my first thought is a cord prolapse, that if the cord, the umbilical cord, were to prolapse or come out before the baby's head, it sits on the cord and your baby can die pretty quickly. And so the treatment to that is somebody putting their fingers inside, pushing the head off of the cervix, off of the cord, to allow for blood flow while they do an emergency C-section. It is not fun. It is, in fact, it's very exciting as a provider, exciting not in a good way. But in that case, in order to save your baby's life, we need to do a vaginal exam, right? And I can confidently say that is the treatment for it. But those kind of circumstances are so incredibly rare, guys, that's where you having a care team that you trust, that you know is going to take your preferences, to understand your history into context. In, let's say, a cord prolapse situation, if I'm your provider and you trust me and you know that I'm there to help you, you know that I'm there not just to do things because I want to do them, but because they have a purpose, and I look at you and I say, look, I am so sorry right now, but I have to do a vaginal exam to make sure that your baby's okay, because there's potential, we're seeing signs that it's not. Is it okay that I check you? I need a yes, even in that circumstance. And a lot of times we're not very good at asking. We kind of assume that you give us consent, but especially for those of you that care, that this is a trigger, that this is a thing, you need to be communicating with your care team so that they know that that's a preference that you have, and they can potentially be flexible and go with the flow with you and your particular preferences and your particular birth. I have dry mouth. That was a lot. Yes, there are providers that exist. Find somebody that you feel comfortable with and then discuss what your preferences are. Understand when would be the appropriate times where a vaginal exam would be extremely beneficial to you, and other times when it could potentially be avoided. I hope that helps. Lavonne, you're opening a can of worms that I'm about to eat. I don't know if that's a thing, but you get what I mean. Lavonne Lee says, I appreciate this video. This comes from my most recent video on the Arrive trial. I was induced at 38 weeks with my first due to complications. I honestly cannot say enough positive things about my birth. My baby was completely healthy and I delivered vaginally. I would honestly like to understand the stigmas and negativity surrounding inductions. I will likely have another one in January when I'm due with baby number 2 and my docs reference this study. So let's talk about stigma in general. Let's talk about strong birth opinions. Let's talk about your own preferences related to your labor and birth. So I will address this as far as the stigma related to inductions. What I hear from women are that induction is not natural, that it's not trusting your body, that it's not allowing your body and giving your body a chance, that it's giving artificial medications, introducing foreign things to your body in order to have your baby vaginally, hopefully, etc. There's a cascade of interventions. If you're trying to avoid an epidural, then an induction honestly is probably not the best idea, especially an elective one. I think that's probably where the stigma comes from on the other side of the argument. But let me just have a little chat with you mamas for a second. I have been a part of the birth world now for 8 years. I have worked in the hospital, I've worked in the community, I've taught hospital classes, I've taught community classes. I've now been online and engaging with you guys in various platforms and understanding the birth culture. And what I have learned is that women have really strong preferences and that women have really strong opinions about how each other should birth. And I would just like to bring to light in a very gentle, loving way that how you choose to birth your baby is completely your choice. That how your mom or your sister decides to birth their baby is completely their choice. And so when everybody tries to tell you their opinion, they try to tell you what's better, what's worse. Is there clinical data? Are there studies? Are there information out there to help you make an informed choice? Yes. But also you are your own individual. You have your own background, you have your own culture, you have your own resources, you have your own country that you're dealing with. And all of that is jumbled up into influencing how you make medical decisions for yourself, for your labor, your birth, your pregnancy, etc. And so I want to encourage you all that it's okay not to do what everybody else does. It's okay to make a decision for yourself. It's okay to have a different decision. And if you want to be induced an elective induction for various reasons after weighing the pros and cons, then that is completely your choice. I am not going to tell you that that's not a good choice for you because that might be the best thing for you. But if you feel very strong that you don't want to be induced or you don't want an epidural or you don't want a C-section, then that's completely your choice as well. The goal is informed consent, that you're making the decision for yourself because you have all of the facts that you need to make a decision for yourself. I encourage you ladies that if you're maybe one of those that has a very strong opinion, doulas out there, I see this all the time, that if you have a very strong opinion about how somebody should birth, you had an amazing birth experience and you did it a certain way and it worked for you, to hold that loosely and understand that that's your own isolated experience and how it worked for you may not work for somebody else based on themselves being different than you. And so I encourage us to just love each other, to care for each other better, to listen to one another, to try to understand each other's perspective, each other's decisions, whether that you agree with them or not, whether you would do the same thing or not, that we could just walk alongside of each other. Pregnancy is hard enough. Being a mom, labor and birth, parenting, postpartum, being a dad is all very hard in and of itself. And so we have enough pressures on ourselves to make different decisions and do the right thing. All of you want to do the right thing. Can we just give each other the grace and the understanding to listen and learn from one another without hostility, without being mean, without judgment, that we can just support each other in our preferences no matter what they are? That's my little pep talk for today, and I'm gonna leave us with that because I think that that message needs to be talked about more. I think that we have lots of room for growth and improvement in this area of just loving and supporting one another and not being catty or mean or judgmental. So think about yourself, do a little internal work, assess yourself and say, you know what, yeah, I think I've been one of those people. Let me work at that in one way. Think of one way that you could improve on that, or reach out to the mom that maybe you scolded for not breastfeeding her baby or whatever this week. Let's come alongside each other and support each other in love and acceptance and so much grace, understanding that being a parent and a new mom and a person in the world is hard. And we need each other in order to survive and thrive as human beings, moms, parents, sisters, brothers, wives, whatever. That's what I got. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for being here today. If you haven't subscribed already, I would very much appreciate it if you subscribe to my channel, give it a like, share it with a friend, spread the love and joy. If you don't follow me on Instagram, go on over there for lots more information. If you want all the things, I have so many options for you on my website for more information, comprehensive beginning to end, so you're not missing anything. If you want to work one-on-one with me, I have an entire program where we can work one-on-one. We can set up a consultation to talk through what your options are and what your goals are for that. I want to help you in whatever way possible to have not only a happy birth, but also feel so confident and empowered through the process. Until next time, don't forget to flex and flow, and I will see you soon. Bye. I look skinny as possible. Let's be honest. There's only so much you can do. There's no, I just making sure my teeth are okay. Oh yeah, there's lipstick on them. Now we're laboring. Holy moly. Wow, I have a problem. Oh my gosh. Oh my. Oh wow. Oh wow. Excuse me. Oh no, here comes another. So let me start over. And somebody shoves their vagina. Don't shove your vagina. Soft steak or something. Like one that you've like maybe pounded out or something and it's like a little stretchy. That's not a good example. That's probably what you see on your lab resort. On your lab resort. Wouldn't that be nice? Vagine. I don't know what else. I appreciate you. Vagine, vagina, vagina. All done.